Hopefully you have followed us over from the main session where I had the privilege of introducing you to our new brand influencer. We are thrilled to be partnered with registered dietitian, nutritionist, and research fellow, Dr. Megan Rossi, the gut health doctor. It's great to see that you are taking this opportunity to be educated by one of the most recognized and influential gut health experts in the world. So, are you ready to discover the secret to health and happiness? I have a gut instinct that you are. So once again, here is the gut health doctor, Dr. Megan Rossi. Take it away, Dr. Rossi.
Thanks, Ashley. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with USANA to talk about my favorite topic, and that is, of course, gut health. Now, before we get into the details of gut health, I wanted us all to take a bit of a step back and think to ourselves, actually, what is gut health? Now, I know I'm not at home with all of you, but I wanted you all to have a little think. Do you think gut health is related to A, digestion? Who thinks it's more about the bacteria? So B. Who thinks it's more about C, the digestion, bacteria, and more? And who's going to be completely honest with me and say, actually, they're not quite sure, and that's why they've tuned in to hear more? I'll give you a couple of seconds to make your selection before I reveal the answer, which is letter C. Digestion, bacteria, and so much more. So gut health actually relates to the functioning of our entire digestive tract. So you can see here, it's this 9-meter long tube that delivers food from entry all the way to exit. And there are really 3 main reasons why good gut health is important for absolutely everyone. The first one is, you know the good old saying, you are what you eat? It's kind of not that accurate. It's more you are what you digest. Because like I touched on, no matter how healthy the food you're putting into your body is, if you don't have a good gut lining, no matter how robust the food is, you're really not going to be able to extract that nutrition from your gut into your blood to feed your other organs like your skin, your hair, your kidneys, etc. So really, to make the most out of your food, you need to have good gut health. The second one, which is obviously hugely important at the moment, is the fact that 70% of our immune system lives along this 9-meter digestive tract. And that's certainly why we see the research highlighting people who've got strong, supported immune systems also have good gut health. But it's really this third element that really is absolutely mind-blowing. And it's the fact that we contain trillions of microorganisms, including those gut bacteria, along that 9-meter digestive tract. And it's these microorganisms that really is changing essentially what it means to be human. So over the next 30 minutes we have together, we're going to touch on a range of different things. So firstly, looking at understanding your gut. And I think this is a really important thing because a lot of us are starting to get more focused about what we put into our bodies. But actually, as soon as we swallow it, most of us have no idea what actually happens. And I think that's a really important thing to be aware of. We'll then look more into the microbes. So what do these microorganisms actually do for us and why should we look after them? We'll then touch on nutrition for the gut. We'll look at some common complaints people experience. We'll look at digestive upset. We'll also touch on non-dietary approaches because I think this is another important one. A lot of us fixate on what we're feeding our microbes, but actually we forget about the other things that we need to do to really look after our microbes. And then I will leave you in the kitchen, which is my favorite room in the house, with really practical advice that you can share with your friends and family, how to really make the most out of your gut health. So first things first, understanding your gut. So like I said, our gut is this 9-meter digestive tract, kind of like this factory line you can see in the image here. And I think it's important we talk through kind of what happens along each of the stages. So just imagine you've just taken a bite of your favorite food. It might be an apple or some chocolate or whatever it is. Now imagine you just chewing that food. Now this is actually where digestion begins because we not only start to physically break down the food, but we contain digestive enzymes in our saliva, which start to chemically break down that food. And there's been some really amazing research which has highlighted the power of chewing our food well for digestion. Now I know it sounds really simple, but I wanted to share this study with you. So you can see in the diagram here, they compared the number of chews people had. I think they were having nuts in this study. And those who chewed their nuts only 10 times and then swallowed it actually malabsorbed a lot of the good nutrition from those nuts, compared to the people who chewed their nuts around 40 times. Now, obviously, nuts you need to chew a lot more than most foods, but I think a good target is to try to chew your food at least 15 to 20 times, depending on the consistency, and that will really help maximize your absorption of the nutrients. So once we swallow our food, it then goes down our esophagus or our food pipe and into our stomach. Now, our stomach is really like a washing machine because we not only physically chuck around the food, it releases different types of detergents and acids and things to clean and break down the food further. And then once it forms like a puree consistency, it makes its way onto the next part, which is a very funny name because it's called the small intestine, although it's like 6 meters long, so it's certainly not small. Now, in the small intestine, this is where most of our nutrition gets from our gut into the blood. So things like most of our carbohydrates, most of our fats and our proteins get digested there. And you can see in the diagram there is that blood filtration system. So that's how the food gets from our gut into the blood to feed those other organs. And that brings me on to the final part of our digestive tract called the large intestine. Now, historically, no one wanted to talk about the large intestine because essentially that is where poop is made. But with the new microbiome science coming out, we're now much more fascinated about this part. And that is because this last around 1.5 meters is where we have those trillions of microorganisms living. And that's where they do their magic. So, moving on to the second part, looking actually at these microorganisms. So a lot of people, I think, have heard of the fact that they have bacteria in their gut, but there are a number of key principles that I wanted to share with you. So the first one, we talk about this community, it's not just gut bacteria. Yes, bacteria dominate, but all of us actually have fungi such as yeast in our gut. We've all got viruses and some parasites, which I know historically we were told to fear, but actually synergistically they work to look after our body. Another fun fact that you might want to share with friends and family is that we actually contain more microbial cells than we do human cells. So essentially, we're kind of like aliens in disguise. There's more of them than there is humans. But the really interesting part of all this is actually in terms of the number of genes these bacteria have, which really means the number of skills, that far exceeds that of what humans have. So a lot of the things our body does actually comes down to these microorganisms and not necessarily the human cells doing them. And one I wanted to leave you guys with was the fact that, you know what, your GM is actually unique to you. So even if you're an identical twin, you house your own unique community of microorganisms that's there to really look after you, if you look after it. Now, when I started to get more into public engagement, one of the things people asked me was, okay, if I have to change some things in my life, I kind of want to know what these microbes are doing for me. So I put together our microbes CV, which goes through how hardworking they really are for us. So the first one, we know our microbes are very strong in terms of their communication. And in fact, there's really 3 main mechanisms to which we think our microbes in our gut can talk to our brain, so a very different part of the body. So the first one is our immune system, which you can think of kind of like an alarm system. So remember I said at the start, 70% of our immune system lives in the gut. So our microbes and our immune system very much live hand in hand. And if our immune system gets flared up by our microbes, that produces a range of different inflammatory markers, which then can communicate with our brain. So the first mode of communication is kind of microbes talking or setting off this alarm system. The second one is looking at the kind of like a mobile phone. So the microbes can activate our nervous system, and that triggers up via this vagus nerve to our brain. So that is another really powerful way which we think the microbes in our gut can talk to our brain via that mobile phone. And then it's a third one, which we certainly are discovering more and more about. And that's kind of like the postal system, where when our microbes eat certain foods, they break them down into different chemicals. Those chemicals then get put into our blood system, and that some of them can then pass this blood-brain barrier. So there we have it, the 3 ways we think our microbes can talk to our brain. We've got the alarm system, the mobile phone, and the postal service. Our microbes, in terms of their CV, are also very experienced bodyguards. So there is a wealth of research out there, and for any of you who are geeks like me and love the studies, you can see the reference on the slide there and check that study out, which really showed that having specific types of probiotics, which are live microorganisms, actually can make a really meaningful difference in supporting people's immune systems. Another fun fact about our microbes is actually they've got a degree in biochemistry. So we know that they can produce a range of different vitamins and hormones. And my research group at King's has actually translated this into looking at diet. And what we've done is we collected poop samples from a range of people with digestive issues. And using those poop samples, we were able to predict who would and wouldn't be able to respond to things like probiotics and also different types of dietary interventions. Again, highlighting that our microbes and the things that they're doing in our gut can help predict personalised nutrition. And it's such an exciting area that we're going to be doing more and more research in. And then the last one, for those who are into social media, you'll appreciate that our microbes are really a verified influencer in that the research has now linked them with pretty much every organ in the human body. So they are very powerful little things, and that's just, another reason why we really should be taking out just, a few minutes each day to think of them and really to nourish them. Now that brings me on to the next section, which is all about nutrition for the gut. Now, certainly back a decade plus ago, when I was studying nutrition and dietetics, we did learn that nutrition really could impact our health management. So we knew that was a really important link there. But all of that mechanistic sort of work was solely through how human cells broke down and metabolized that food, and that's how it improved our health. However, now with this understanding that we have these trillions of microorganisms, we appreciate there is now another pathway. So for those who love a new mechanism, we know that our food can now be metabolized and broken down by the bacteria, and them in turn can improve our health outcomes that way. And that really, I think, has been a game changer in our understanding of nutrition and the advice that we now give around nutrition. So here's another little quiz for you guys, just to make sure you're still with me, you're still tuned in. What do you think your gut microbe's favourite nutrient is? Who's going to say A, it's protein? Who's going to say B, it's all carbohydrates? Who's going to say C, it's fibre? And who's going to say D, it's fat? Now, I'll give you a couple of seconds to make your selection before we do the big reveal. The answer is fibre. So the really cool thing about fibre is that humans actually don't have the enzymes to break down fibre. So actually when we eat fibre foods, which come from all our plant-based foods, most of it actually goes through that 9-metre digestive tract undigested. And it makes its way into that final part. Remember that large intestine where most of those gut bacteria live? And it's there where fibre really works its magic. Specifically, the microbes, so the bacteria, break down that fibre, so they have the enzymes needed to eat fibre, unlike humans. And when they do so, they produce a range of different chemicals, and we call them our short-chain fatty acids. And what those are kind of like the communication molecules. Now, you don't need to get too much into the science, but if you love the diagram, you can look certainly more into this research study, which highlights these short-chain fatty acids are kind of like the chemicals which get put in that postal service. So remember we spoke about the ways the gut can communicate with the brain and that postal service. So these short-chain fatty acids can get deposited from our gut into our blood to go and communicate with our other organs and potentially even our brain. Now, in terms of the research, there is so much research out there highlighting that people who eat more fibre do have better health outcomes. And again, if you love the science, you can check out this really robust paper which comes from one of the world's highest scientific journals. And you can see included 185 individual studies. They pulled together results and show that for every 8 grams increase in fibre per day, people could significantly improve a range of different health outcomes. So for those who aren't into nutrition, you might be wondering, okay, so what does 8 grams actually mean? So it includes things like a large potato with the skin on, that contains 8 grams of fibre, some veggie sticks and some hummus, that again is another 8 grams, or a cup of legumes, so beans and pulses, again, that's another 8 grams. So these are all, small changes in people's lives that can have huge impacts. And think of it as the fibre feeding your inner community, which in turn will look after you. Now, a new kind of discovery in this world of fibre is actually that not all fibre is the same. There's many different types of fibres out there, and we actually get different fibres from each of our different food groups or our different plant-based food groups. And I think this principle really highlights why it's important not to necessarily cut out food groups, because each one actually delivers different types of fibres which feed different types of gut bacteria. So for example, if we just ate all broccoli types of fibre, we're only going to be feeding the broccoli-loving gut bacteria, and we're kind of going to neglect and starve off other types of bacteria that might like, whole grains or nuts and seeds. So again, this concept of really trying to get diversity is thought to be key. So, how are we doing on the fibre front? So if we think of kind of like on a global level, particularly in the Western world, sadly, very few of us are getting enough of fibre in our diet. So from country to country, the dietary recommendations around fibre kind of change just very slightly, but generally it's about 30 grams of fibre a day we should be aiming for. And in my opinion, that's kind of the minimum. However, most of us are actually getting under 20 grams of fibre. Now, the other thing about fibre is that we're not only not getting enough totally, we're not getting very good sources of fibre in our diet. So to highlight this is some research from the UK, but it's very reflective of the rest of the globe. It looks at where our fibre actually comes from, so what sorts of foods we're getting our fibre from. And from the outset, you probably think, oh, that makes sense. I mean, veggies are high in fibre, cereals are high in fibre. However, when you look into the detail, you start to see actually, of the fibre coming from this veg category, most of it's coming from things like potato chips, which is not the best source of fibre. And similarly with our grain section, we can see that actually a lot of the fibre coming from this category is coming from things like refined pastas and refined bread. Again, not great sources. So just to recap on the difference between whole grains and refined types of carbohydrates is the whole grains have this really brilliant fibre layer, whereas the refined grains actually have that stripped away. So the sources of fibre we're actually getting in our diet are actually really quite poor. So there's plenty of room for improvement there. Now, again, another new topic when we've discovered more about the gut bacteria has highlighted that yes, fibre is clearly important, but actually it's even more important because it's not just about this one nutrient, fibre. There's many other things in plant-based foods which feed our good gut bacteria. So things like our prebiotics, which essentially are certain types of subspecialty types of fibres which feed the good bacteria. We also have these things called the polyphenols, which you may have heard of, and they're things found in like dark chocolate and even some red wine, which you may have heard has been associated with health benefits. Again, most polyphenols actually feed the gut bacteria. And then there's a range of other thousands of bioactives in plant-based foods. And it's this concept that has delivered, I guess, this new understanding that we should be trying to get in as many different types of plant-based foods in our diet as we possibly can. And this really came from a study undertaken by some US colleagues, did brilliant research. And what they did is compared people who had 30 different types of plant-based foods in their diet compared to those who only had 10. And what they found, those who had the 30 actually had better gut health, more diverse range of gut bacteria than those who kind of ate the same 10 kind of plant-based foods on repeat. So this really brings together this concept of plant points. And I wanted to kind of stop you there and get you to have a think about how many different types of plant-based foods have you had in the past week. Now remember, when it comes to plants, it's not just fruit and veg. There's really 6 different plant categories. So we have our whole grains, our nuts, our seeds, our legumes, so our beans and our pulses, our fruit, our veg, and even herbs and spices. So spend about 20 seconds having a think through how many different types you're getting in per week. Are you more close to the 10, or actually are you getting the 30 plus? That's some homework for you guys to complete, is really try next time you're at the shops, not just get the broccoli, but get the steamed multi-pack of veg mixes. Instead of just getting your pumpkin seeds, get your multi-seed pack. So think about diversity really is key to feeding your good gut microbes. Now, I also wanted to share another really impressive clinical trial. So for those who love the detail of studies, you can go look up this study in more detail, but it really was landmark. It was actually undertaken by some of my colleagues in Australia from the Food and Mood Institute. And what they did is they took a group of people who had low mood, and essentially they randomized half of them to getting this gut nourishing diet, which we'll talk about more in a moment what it included, and the other half got this befriending type of counselling. And that was just to act as a control, to make sure any benefit in the diet group wasn't just because they were seeing a research dietitian. So they followed each intervention, either the diet or the befriending counselling, for 12 weeks. And then they got them to come back and they reassessed their mood. And what they found was really quite remarkable. Those in the diet group had a significant improvement in their mood levels compared to those in the control group. So what did this magical diet look like? Well, you can see here in the diagram, it was very much heavy in these plant-based foods and very much founded on a Mediterranean diet. If we look into the detail, the diet actually delivered 50 grams of fibre a day. Now remember I highlighted that the general recommendations are around 30 grams, yet most of us are getting 20 grams. This one delivered 50, so it had a very well-fed community of microbes, going on in people's gut. But of course, we can't just attribute everything to the fibre. There's many other nutrients in this diet listed there that you can, we certainly know are associated and have shown to help improve people's mood. I want to touch on fermented food because it's another area where there's quite a lot of myths and questions out there about whether they really are worth investing in. So my research team at King's actually wanted to answer this question, so we pulled together all the different research out there and we collated it in this paper which you can access, and we had a look at the different mechanisms, and actually it looks like there's many different ways in which fermented foods can have these health benefits. However, when we looked a little bit deeper to have a look at what the human studies have actually shown, sadly there hasn't actually been that much research in this space. So overall, my recommendation is, if you enjoy fermented foods, absolutely go for it. It's a great way to incorporate new foods and new flavours, but in terms of the robust scientific evidence, we still need to do a little bit more study. Now here you can actually see I'm personally a bigger lover of kefir, both the water kefir and the dairy kefir, and these are the kind of millions of microbes that actually make these kefir drinks, which is so easy to make. It's like 2 minutes of your time each day, and I'm sure in the future we'll talk more about how you can do some fermenting at home with your friends and family, but it's a really fun way to engage, I think, in this whole new microbiome world. Common complaints. Now, this is a really important one for me because so many people are living in silence when it comes to, common sort of gut issues. Now, if people are experiencing gut issues, the first thing you should always do is go and see your GP or your physician just to be on the safe side. It's, always worth a quick chat. But then things like constipation. Actually, no one likes to talk about it, but it affects so many people and actually costs governments, hundreds of millions of dollars and pounds each and every year. So it's actually, like I said, something a lot of people are suffering in silence with, and needing a lot of help around. The interesting thing with a lot of these common complaints, though, is actually there's pretty good evidence that we can actually take charge and manage as well as prevent a lot of these kind of common complaints like the constipation, like the bloating, through simple strategies. So in my new book, Love Your Gut, I've actually brought together all the different types of evidence-based strategies which have shown to help different types of common complaints. So things like your constipation, because at the end of the day, everyone's gut is actually slightly different. So there's never going to be a one solution for all, but there is a collection of strategies which really can make a meaningful difference in people's lives who are suffering. So my key message, don't suffer in silence. One of the things I probably get asked the most on social media is, how do I actually know if I have a healthy gut? So people understand it's important, but they're kind of like, well, I don't really get gut symptoms. Does that mean I have a healthy gut? And unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as that. There is no single assessment that really determines, or no single outcome that determines whether someone has a healthy gut. It's a little bit more complex than that. So when I was writing Love Your Gut and Eat Yourself Healthy, I wanted to really help people get a better idea of where their gut health sits, because that can really help people on their gut health journey. So I developed this 10-question assessment, which you guys can all go and complete at theguthealthdoctor.com. And what it does is looks at the key areas of research where we know that gut health can have a really strong role to play. So it asks things like, yes, do you get gut symptoms? But also, how often are you getting sick? How much sleep are you getting? How stressed are you? So the key principles, and it really helps give you a better holistic insight into where your gut health currently sits. Talking about common gut complaints, there's actually some really great research around the role of this gut-brain axis and actually how relaxing that gut-brain axis really can improve our gut happiness. So I wanted to share a study with you which included a range of people with digestive complaints, and what they did is randomized half of them to getting this diet which we use in clinical practice called the low FODMAP diet, and we know that does help with people in the short term for some of their digestive upset issues. And the other half of people got randomized to this gut-directed yoga flow. Now, they didn't change their diet at all, so they didn't take out any trigger foods. What they did was help to relax that gut-brain axis. So both groups followed those interventions for 12 weeks, and then they reassessed their gut happiness. And actually, as you'd expect, those in the diet group did have some improvement in their gut happiness, but what they didn't expect is that those in the yoga group actually had remarkable improvement also in their gut happiness. And I think this study was really landmark to highlight that when people are having gut issues, you know, it's not always blame it on the food, cut out the food. A lot of it comes down to this communication that occurs between our gut and our brain. And sometimes we really need to tap into that. And yoga flows is a really great way to do that. In fact, this study actually inspired me to include a 15-minute gut-directed yoga flow in my book. So I worked with a yogi expert, Richie Norton, who I essentially gave the protocol they used in the study and said, can you please make this into a daily routine people can incorporate into their lives to really nourish this gut-brain axis? And so was developed this 15-minute yoga flow. So if you check it out and you try it, do let me know how your gut-brain axis gets on with it. Now, when I see people in clinic, most people say to me, look, I just want a diet solution. It's just much easier to follow a diet plan. And I have to tell them that no matter how perfect your gut diet is, unfortunately, if you're super stressed, not getting enough sleep, and not moving your body, you're not going to get the optimal gut health. And that's because we need to really nourish all aspects of our gut, of our lifestyle, to really maximize our gut health. And this is highlighted by a range of different studies, which shows that a lack of sleep can negatively impact our gut microbes, but also there is a link between our microbes and actually a sleep outcome. So there is this bidirectional relationship between our microbes and our sleep. And this is very similar with stress, so de-stressing and exercising more also has been shown to improve people's gut health. Now finally, in the kitchen, my favorite part of the house. So it is all good and well to talk about the brilliance and the amazing science coming around gut health, but actually if people don't have practical, take-homes, then it's kind of like, well, what does this all mean for me and my everyday life? So when I was writing Love Your Gut and Eat Yourself Healthy, I came up with a gut health on a plate, because people always ask me, what do I feed them? What should my plate look like? So here's a bit of an example of the sorts of things you might want to include in your diet. But remember, it really is back to diversity. So here are my 7 principles to really get the most out of your gut health in the kitchen. The first one is eating mostly plants. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean only plants. If you still enjoy some animal products, it's okay to include them. You can still have a very healthy gut. The second one is all about diversifying your diet, so trying to get in as many of those different plant-based foods as you can. Also going for the, whole and natural and not worrying about the perfect food and the refined food. The whole and natural is going to generally be better for your gut health. Herb and spice your life. Get amongst those legumes that are a really good source of those prebiotics, those fibers which feed your good gut bacteria. Dabbling in fermented foods, and then remembering to taste, explore, pause, and enjoy. Now, to leave you, I wanted to share how I developed one of the recipes in Love Your Gut called my prebiotic chocolate bark. And I actually came up with this idea when I was studying my PhD. So I was learning so much about how amazing these microorganisms were. And it was Easter time, and I thought, my favorite food is white chocolate, but that does not nourish my gut bacteria at all. It's purely selfish, it purely feeds my taste buds. And I thought, these guys are looking after me, doing so much. I kind of want them to celebrate Easter as well. So I thought, how about I just combine the brilliance of both worlds? So what I've done is combined white chocolate with prebiotic food. So remember, they feed your good gut bacteria. So things like your dried mango and your pistachio nuts are prebiotic. And also have some polyphenols in there, which comes from things like your extra virgin olive oil and your dark chocolate. And I've combined them together, so it's producing this prebiotic chocolate bark that not only feeds your taste buds, but also your gut bacteria. And that's it. Thanks so much, guys, for dedicating your time to learning more about gut health. I'll see you soon.